All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Partnership Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Today's guest is someone I'm a huge fan of, one of the sharpest, most no-fluff minds in tech partnerships. She's known for calling it like it is, building programs that actually work, and being just as comfortable in a sales call as she is in a product strategy meeting. She's currently Director of Technology Partnerships at Unanet. Rachel Collie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Cool. Well, before we dig into product strategy and partner chaos, we always love to kick things off with a lightning round to show people what you're made of. Just 5 quick hitting questions. First thing that comes to mind. Sound good?
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, first one. What's the most underrated skill in partnerships that doesn't show up on a resume, but ultimately wins you deals?
Project management. I think that especially when you look at technology partnerships, that we do everything in tandem, whether it be evaluation, whether it be go-to-market, it's building an integration, that you have to be able to manage all of those streams, and all of that deals with project management. Whether you do it Excel, Gantt chart, whatever, it's all project management. And that's never seen on a resume, and it's never asked for in a job description.
I love that. And we're going to certainly dive into that later on today, which I totally agree with. First, next question. What does your daughter, Elsa, actually think you do at work all day long?
Because it's summertime, kids are home. My 5-year-old is home. She's heard me on call. She knows she can't talk during calls. And so I put it through ChatGPT, asking it, how do I tell and explain to Elsa what I do all day? And so it wrote me a story. I posted on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. And she thinks that I'm the chief puzzle master, that we take all these different fitting parts and put them together, whether it be conversations internally at Unanet, whether it be partnerships we're putting together, but it's all about putting a puzzle together. And it's a great analogy for her because she loves puzzles, she loves Legos, and how everything fits together.
Well, I think you just gave us the title for this episode, the Chief Puzzle Master. I think that's a fitting title for you and for this episode. So I love that. And next up is, you've been really vocal about prioritization and just having the backbone to say no. So the next question is, what's a recent no that you're particularly proud of that you said out loud?
So I think that for anybody, especially running technology partners, we want to say yes to everything. We want to say yes to every partner that comes through the door, because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to actually work and what's not. And when you are a single operator of a relatively large program like I am, doing strategy and execution, I have to say no. And so we have said no to a few partners this year that I know our execs wanted to say yes to, but these were early startups without a lot of customers. We didn't know their value. And so to be able to say no and be able to say to an executive leader that this is not the right partnership for us today, that's a really big flex to have to be able to say no to that particular partnership.
Love that. And we're certainly going to talk more about that later. One quick thing I'll say there, which I totally agree with, is saying no engenders a ton of trust with your leadership. Because as you scale in the ranks in more leadership roles, resource allocation or resource kind of preservation, so to speak, is a critical skill. Like you only have so much finite resources, so much budget, so much time. So being able to say no actually makes you look really good upwards. So I'm glad you referenced that.
Yeah. And I think also that too is that with that finite piece is that if you want me to say yes to this partner, then what can you take off my plate to give me time to run that partnership? Because I think, as we all know, it doesn't matter how big or how small the partner is from a volume of scale. They still take the same amount of work. Bigger partners, enterprise partnerships, obviously take a lot more work to get referrals, resources, things out of them. But smaller partners, because they typically don't know what they're doing yet in regards to how to build integrations, how to co-sell, they take just as much work as the big dogs do. And so what I've learned is, if you're going to give me this small one to work on, what can you take off my plate? Because I'm a perfectionist. I want to do everything well. And I don't want to let things fall off the plate that aren't doing well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And we'll certainly talk a little bit later on about prioritization best practices. Next question for you is, what was your favorite moment at work in the past year that had nothing to do with hitting a number?
So a little bit of backstory. And I know we'll talk about this in a bit and some of the things that my daughter and I have gone through the last 3 years. But in 2022, 2023, that was all about getting us back on a solid foundation, making sure that we were surviving through everything we were going through with the death of my husband. 2024 was about a health crisis that I needed to get us through, making sure that my daughter knew I was okay and that she wasn't losing another parent. And so 2025 has been all about me. And I say that a bit selfishly because I needed to focus on me, professionally, personally, focus on me. So what I'm most proud of this year is the amount of professional development that I've been able to invest in myself, that Unanet has invested in me, I took your mastermind cohort, which was pretty pivotal for me in how I work internally with executives here at Unanet. Some other professional development courses that I've taken as well to help me speak more at that executive board level, and other pieces that I've pulled in. But this year hasn't definitely want to hit numbers, but I also want to focus on me as I build out what I'm doing and how I build out and how I upskill my skill set.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Rachel, and being so vulnerable. And certainly we'll talk more about that later on. But I mean, seriously, kudos to you for just, you know, prioritizing yourself this year, given everything that you've been through. And certainly I can say, having just had you in our recent program, I love just how much you lean in. If you're going to do something, you know you got to make it count and you're not there to waste time. I think that's something that I immediately had respect for you for.
Thank you.
All right, last question, then we'll get into the fun stuff. And this will be a good one for you. If you had to slap a bumper sticker on your partner program and it had to piss off 50% of channel folks, what would it say?
So here we go. My big thing is you do not have to have a seat at the table. You need an advocate who speaks your language who sits at the table. We hear time and time again from different organizations that you have to have a seat at the table. You have to have a seat at the table. And the problem becomes is that not everyone within an organization can have a seat at the table. And so I'm very proud of the fact that I report into our Chief Innovation Officer, and he can speak about partnerships during executive meetings, during board meetings, just as well as I can. And he is a very strong advocate for me. He's the reason that we're getting some resources that I didn't think would be possible for me, the reason that we're looking at technology and budgets going in 2026. But I don't need to be at the table. I just need an advocate at the table who speaks the same language.
I'm honestly really glad you started that way, because I feel like, especially folks who are maybe early into management, team lead, director level, they're clamoring for a seat at the table, and you got to be careful what you ask for, right? Because then the magnifying glass is firmly on you and the sun starts to heat up a bit. So you got to be careful what you ask for. And I love how you're just honest, like, look, one day maybe I'll have a seat at the table, sure. But I'm certainly just grateful that my direct manager does have a seat at the table and really leans into what I have to say and trusts what we're building and the vision we're setting. So I think that's a refreshing take that kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off. Like, sitting at the board table, is that really what you want right now? Perhaps not. What you really want is just belief and resource allocation, because they see what you're doing is valuable.
Yep, exactly.
Love that. Cool. Well, that's exactly the tone I hope we'd set: blunt and tactical and a little dangerous. Now let's rewind to where it all started, from accidental start to real operator. And you landed in partnerships by fluke, right? Something about helping a friend, I believe. So what actually clicked for you that made you ultimately stay in partnerships?
Yeah, so I was leading a sales team for a small consulting company here in Denver where I live. And I went through a riff and I was trying to look for the next opportunity. And one of my networking peers said, here's an opportunity for you. It's all about sales. You should take a look at it. It's kind of a mid-level company. And all I keyed in on was the word sales. I didn't see the word channel before that. I just saw sales. And when I looked at the job description, it took into account a lot of the things that I knew about sales already. Building relationships, selling, co-selling. It's just keyed on a lot of things that I already knew and that I did really well. What I didn't understand was the channel part of it. And the first partnership role I landed was with a company where 50% of their revenue was generated by the channel. And so I already had huge visibility within the organization. I had resources that I never knew were possible. And it keyed in on a lot of things that I did really well. Relationship building, building trust, building strategy, building focus, all the things that I did. What was different though is I obviously wasn't a direct line seller, but I was working with all the people who did. And that's what really clicked for me. And I saw the power of partnerships within an organization, that you're putting all this confidence and trust in people who didn't work for you, but were driving so much of your volume. They were driving 50%. They were doing support tickets. They were doing consulting. So that was just really pivotal for me to see how partnerships could transform an organization.
Amazing. We hear this so often of how people kind of stumbled in, so to speak, but ultimately just capitalizing on the opportunities that presented themselves, as you clearly did. And now in our prep, you called it the most transformational role you've ever had. Curious, just like, why is that? And ultimately, what changed for you in those first few years?
Yeah, so this will date myself a bit, but it was transformational for me and also transformational for the organization, because I was leading a channel of about 250 channel sellers that were used to selling box software. So some of us remember going to Best Buy and buying Microsoft off the shelf. We were selling a CRM in a box, priced $600 per purchase, and we were transforming them. We were going from a box software to a subscription SaaS delivery. And if you've ever done the numbers for that, that first 2 years of moving from box to SaaS or subscription, it's a big dip in your revenue.
Right.
All right. And then you start seeing the hockey stick approach. And so for these 250 sellers, they were really scared. They were really scared to see their revenue drop so significantly in the first 2 years. And so we really had to build out a good strategy for them. And not just a strategy, but showing them the numbers of how this hockey stick approach happens, and the benefit to them. And they just had to trust us, which is hard to do when you see your revenue drop. They needed to trust us for the first 18 months to 2 years. And when I left there, everyone notices the ducks behind me. But this all started because of that role, in that they gave me a rubber duck when I left, because they said, look, we view you as our mama duck. We just all followed in behind you, and you led us exactly where you told us we needed to go. We're all seeing our revenue go up. We trusted you, and this is what's happened. So you'll always be our mama duck to us. So for me, that was profoundly transformational, that you can gain that kind of trust to get people to follow a vision. Because in partnerships, we don't know what's going to happen. It's a vision that we've created. And some of the best partnerships we have at Unanet have been partnerships that we've developed that just followed my vision and said, I trust you, Rachel. Let's see where this goes. And that's the big thing about partnerships, is trust and vision.
I love that. I mean, love the mama duck kind of analogy. I think that's totally fitting. And obviously you evolved into that place where you're so confident, you're executing at a high level, and people really did have that trust. But let's just go back to the early days. Can you think of one really key early mistake perhaps you made in partnerships that still shapes how you think today?
It goes back to a statement I made earlier, and that is saying yes to everything. It is really hard when you're new in your career, and it doesn't matter if it's partnerships, it doesn't matter what role you have. You want to impress people. So you say yes to everything, and you don't realize that the most powerful sentence, and it's a complete sentence, is the word no. And so early on in my career, I learned how powerful the word no is. I think sometimes I still make a mistake in saying yes to too many things, but I've learned early on the power of the word no. And sometimes no doesn't even require an explanation. It's just no. If you do want to give an explanation, it's kind of who you're delivering that no to, and kind of walking them through, look, if I say yes to this, this is going to suffer if I say yes. So just very early on, I learned the power of the word no.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being so humble there, and I can totally relate to that. In my most recent role as a global head of partnerships at a Series C ISV, I was reporting to our CEO, and he took me on a walk. He was visiting our Toronto office, and he took me for a walk, and he said, Chris, I just want to give you one really important piece of feedback that I've observed from your first 6 to 10 months. And he said, you're saying yes too often. Right? He said, yes is literally the most expensive word in the English language, and you're saying it more than I would like, right? And you're burdening a little bit of our cross-functional resources. I'm worried that you're focusing on too many partners, so I really need you to pare it back. And I'd kind of known that about myself, but to hear it so kind of bluntly by a CEO of all people really got me to get my what together. So I'm glad, you're kind of relating that as well, because it's true, right? We all have the same amount of hours. Is it that some people are just extremely productive, where a lot of us are just kind of flailing?
And I think to go along with it, though, is that, especially when you look at tech partners, is that when we say yes to everything, we forget about the downstream effect. Because when I say yes to everything, that means services says yes to everything. That means sales says yes to everything. That means marketing says yes to everything. So from a partner perspective, we can't say yes to everything, because downstream, very seldom, if ever, can our organization support that.
Exactly. You're writing checks that others have to cash. Exactly. Love that. We'll get into that in a bit. And that's actually a nice segue into part 2 of this conversation, which is product-led partner strategy. This is your power lane, which is product-aligned partner strategy. So in the first question on this topic is, in your words, what does it actually look like when product and partnerships collaborate effectively?
You have a focused roadmap. You have a focused partner strategy. You're not overlapping, and you're all going towards the same goals. So to give you some backstory here at Unanet, I think that 3 years ago, I was kind of a unicorn, but I'm starting to see that change a little bit in the tech partner ISV space. When I first started here at Unanet, I reported directly to our chief product officer. And we did that by design, because when you start looking at technology partnerships, most of the things that I need to be successful sit within the product team. We were still pretty siloed. We have 2 main verticals here at Unanet and multiple product lines. But it was helpful to sit with the chief product officer to really understand where his team was going. We still made a lot of mistakes because we had engineering and product together. And so not everything was aligned or tandem. Fast forward to 2025, I'm reporting to our chief innovation officer, which has all the product management, all of our AI priorities, and a few other special projects underneath that. And we are more aligned. We're having better conversations. I'm being brought into product leadership meetings where I can start looking at roadmaps and say, wait a minute, you have this functionality tagged on your roadmap for 2 years from now. I have a partner that does that today. Can we move some things around from an integration perspective and get ourselves a faster go-to-market strategy using this partner versus you trying to figure out how to build it? And so it's allowed us to have a more focused roadmap conversation. It's allowed our product team to say, look, we have this functionality. We can't build it for 2 to 3 years. Can we find a partner to do it? So the conversations are more open. They're not siloed. And we're actually looking at the roadmap and partner strategy as one and the same.
It's really fascinating to hear, initially reporting to the chief product officer. I've seen so many different types of reporting lines, specifically for tech partnerships people, not so many that ultimately report up to the foremost senior product leader. Candidly, in my career, I would have loved to have had that. I've always reported to the VP of Biz Dev or kind of VP of Revenue, so to speak, eventually the CEO. But I see a ton of value in reporting to the product org. One quick question on that is, you mentioned a lot of upside and positives of that relationship, but what were some of the key challenges in that phase of reporting upwards in a product org exclusively?
Yeah, so I think that, you look at technology partnerships generating or focusing on two things with an organization. Referral and channel definitely have a dollar sign, have a quota carrying dollar sign attached to them. Technology partners are different, right? We are looking at product and how do we make our product faster or better? How do we make things stickier? How do we open up more doors for our sales teams? And then I also work with the sales team. While I don't carry a quota, there's an expectation of attribution. And we all know that attribution within tech partners is the hardest thing to track. And so for me, the greatest challenge is, because I don't report into the sales team, is getting the sales team to buy into what we're doing. How do we use our technology partners to uncover new opportunities? It's the same thing we talk about, right? How do we get our sales team to understand? How do we unlock new ops for you? How do we use tech partners to close your deals faster, higher win rates, higher dollars, all of those pieces? So the greatest challenge for me, not reporting to sales, is getting sales to really understand and buy into what we're doing. And so I give them probably a lot more information and handhold them through a few more things than other tech partners do, tech partner leaders do, but it's simply because of a function where I report and they don't see my face as often.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And then the maddening part about it is, if you do report upwards in the revenue org, maybe you're tighter with those sales cross-functional colleagues, but then the product org, you don't have the same relationship with them. So like, oh, why should we ship this integration or update this existing one? So there's trade-offs, certainly. Just to go back to the collaboration between partner and product team, just to go down that a bit more. At Unanet, I know you use this build by partner lens for roadmap planning. Can you walk us through how that actually works in practice and the impact it's been able to have?
Sure. So, I look at the build versus partner piece first, and what can our team actually deliver? And I look at some big product feature functionality that we are trying to deliver in the next 2 years. And then there's some smaller pieces of functionality that our customers have as, well, we've got to have this, but we don't have time. So it's how do we work together to figure out what we're going to build, where's our expertise, and what do we need to partner with? And what I mean by that is, Unanet has recently launched an asset inventory manufacturing product line within our organization. And there's some big foundational pieces that we know we have to build for that. But we also know that there's some foundational pieces that customers need that we don't have the ability to build in the next 2 to 3 years, but we need it now. And so that's where that partnering comes into place. And our product team really looks at requirements so that then I can go look at the right partners to bring that into place. And then where does that fit into our integration roadmap? Because I think everybody knows whoever picks up the call first to partner is the person who's building the integration, right? And so where does that integration fit into our roadmap? And then we look at the buy side. In the last 3 years, we have acquired 3 companies, all 3 of which have come out of the tech partner area. And we look at that buy side as, is this software that's really going to move the needle for us, either in AI or in market intel or some other functionality that we really need? And are we seeing traction with these partners that make it make sense for us to buy them? Now, that puts me in a sticky situation where we start to buy partners, because typically what's happened is we have 2 to 3 partners in the same space. and we decided that there's one that we're going to buy, what happens to the other two, right? So that puts me into a not great position of having to terminate partnerships. But that build, buy, partner model for us has worked really well for us as we start to build out functionality, build out how our sales team looks at requirements that they need for RFPs, and how we co-sell with those partners as we move forward.
Yeah, really great breakdown. Anyone listening to that gets a ton of tactical insights that they can apply in similar scenarios. I want to peel back the curtain a bit on the decision-making process around kind of build, partner, buy, so to speak. Can you help us understand like who's in the proverbial room, so to speak, of high-level stakeholders who are ultimately chiming in and making decisions on whether it's to build, partner, buy? Obviously yourself, who else is a part of those key conversations? And what does that process look like internally?
So I jokingly say to individuals that I report directly to our chief innovation officer, but then I have other 3 individuals that I dotted line report to. So when we start looking at who's in the room as to how we partner, how we build product, and how we move forward, chief innovation officer in the room, along with his product leadership, is in the room. And we have 2 major product line or business lines here at Unanet, GovCon and architecture, engineering, construction. And I make that distinction because we're very vertical and not horizontal like a lot of companies are. So the product leadership for that business line is in the room. Then I report to an executive VP that runs each business line, and they are in the room as we start talking about how do we look at that build, buy, partner. And then I also have in the room typically our chief strategy officer who is running all of our M&A. And so as we look at build, buy, partner, he comes into that buy side as we start to evaluate who may be an M&A target and how do we position it. When you have a chief strategy officer start making phone calls, the conversation is a bit different because that company knows the direction of the call versus a partner person who's making the call, trying to investigate, pull out information, do discovery, just like we would for any other partnership. But that's typically who's in the room. We do include sales a bit. Sales is more opportunistic when they're looking at opportunities, right? They want to say, hey, we just lost a deal because we don't have this integration. Should we go after it? And that's where the power of the word no comes into place. I can't go after every partner just because we lost one opportunity. Now, if we had 15 or 20 opportunities we lost because of this one integration, different conversation. So we do include sales, but it's more opportunistic versus strategically looking at integrations.
Yeah, again, this is honestly a masterclass. Anyone listening to this can take that transcript, pop it into ChatGPT, and voila, you've got a really nice blueprint of how to navigate your first ever build, partner, buy exercise. So I appreciate you sharing that, Rachel. Now, just to take a step back, a couple of minutes ago, you were talking about kind of the early phases of kind of choosing partners to work with. You've talked about that a few times already. So, I know you have a clear framework for evaluating partners before signing anything. Can you break that down for us? What does that ultimately look like for you? Because it sounds like it's pretty strict and buttoned up.
Sure. So we have 3 main strategy buckets that we looked at, and then we have a much more detailed evaluation criteria that goes behind each bucket. But we have 3 main buckets, and it's 3 buckets that I've stuck to since I started here at Unanet. The first one is those partnerships or that functionality pieces that we are never going to build ourselves. We don't have the skill set, we don't have the bandwidth, and it doesn't make sense for us to build it. A great example for us is that we operate 2 ERP platforms. If you know anything about ERPs, integrations into payroll is table stakes. You have to have them. We integrate with, I think, the 8 biggest payroll providers across the US because we will never build payroll because customers have very specific, unique requirements for payroll. And so if it's something we're never going to build, it fits in that bucket. Second bucket is we just have so many mutual customers based on a scale of how size the potential partner is that it would be silly for us not to partner. And some of those partnerships don't seem obvious because the buying personas are completely different. But because of the way that our customers use the data back and forth between those 2 product lines, it makes sense for us to partner. And it also opens up our TAM a bit too when you see that the joint customers and different personas. So that's one key. And then the third bucket is just really cool, interesting technology. I look at this time last year, we were working with several different vendors that were in the GovCon proposal AI space, helping different government contractors build out these pages and pages of proposals and how are they doing it better. So it's really cool, interesting technology that would be a nice to have within our portfolio. That's where the buy comes into place. If you're in that really cool, interesting technology, you're probably in that buy side of build, buy, partner. And then we start looking at other pieces for criteria. What do your APIs look like? Have you ever built an integration before? Do you have a partner person? Because if they don't have a partner person, we approach them a bit differently. So we have a very specific valuation criteria. And if you don't hit a specific number, we still may partner with you, but you don't get as much go to market, you don't get as much sales access, but we have a very specific criteria in how we put all of those partnerships together.
What I love about that is it's just so systematic and it's methodical and it's not rushed seemingly. Yet what I see constantly in the market, not just in tech partnerships, but other partnership channels as well, is they want to lower every barrier possible to just let everybody in. Their partner application form is name, email, company, that's it. Not collecting much information, not doing much discovery. So, walk us through like what's a realistic timeline, so to speak. Let's just say I hit up Unanet's partner application page today and I start the journey. I just say, hey, I want to potentially work with you. I know it ranges. I know it can be totally different for a given partner, but like realistically, what does that timeline look like? Because I candidly do like to balance speed because you can't take forever to go through a life cycle of a given partner, but you also need to balance that with kind of slowing down enough to get the right information to make the right bets. So what does that look like for you personally?
So I think that the one step that I've seen so many people in this role miss is that, and it's the greatest time barrier just because of schedules, is evaluating each other's product, right? I can go on your website and your website may look cool and the software may look interesting, but then we start like getting under the covers and looking at it, and it's just a bunch of vaporware. So we spend a lot more time evaluating software than probably a lot of other companies do. We want to see your software. We want you to see our software. And then we want to start talking about integration workflows. So if schedules align, I can go from evaluation to assigned partner probably within 3 months. But I would say if schedules don't align, we're probably looking at more of like a 6-month period. But I think the real critical miss that people make is that you don't look at each other's software and you don't look at each other's documentation for APIs or whatever you need to build that integration. And you don't talk about workflows. Like, I don't want any technology partner, and I don't want our team either, to start building any sort of integration until the workflows have been validated on both sides.
I'm honestly so happy that you referenced that because that is a huge mistake. I certainly see ICs make, but candidly see too many leaders make, especially in the product and tech partnership space, where they just have too much power, right? They're deciding who to partner with. They get to decide which integrations and within those, what the use cases are, as if they're the product expert and as if they've talked to a bunch of customers to validate these use cases, right? Like it's pretty crazy, especially at these like early to mid stage companies, how much power tech partner pros actually get. So I'm glad you brought that up. One follow-on question to that is, if schedules align, like who specifically on your side are you bringing to the room for those like really in-depth product breakdowns? Because I've done this extensively myself. And if I can, I typically bring one trusted enterprise salesperson that I really trust who can like get it. I'll typically bring someone equivalent on the customer success side who can speak to the customer, and I'll bring someone from product. And I find that sweet spot of those three amigos joining me, they're all listening and thinking of different things. That really gives me a great breakdown of what the partner's product is or is not. So curious, who joins you in those type of calls?
So I typically don't involve sales or CS. And
Fair.
the reason I don't is because they have a different lens in which looking at things. They want to look at this lens of, can I make money off this partnership? Can I close quota with this partnership? And I think that sometimes with sales and CS, because they carry such large books, they don't always understand how our customers actually use software and how customers want to interact with software. I think they're looking at the dollar retention. And so for me, when I look at who's in the room, I typically have the product leader for whatever that piece is. I typically have someone who understands integration workflow, because eventually during any product demo, some sort of workflow conversation is going to happen. And then I also include, while they do carry sales responsibility, I will typically include, if I can, product marketing, because they understand the voice of the customer very very, very well in the product marketing team. They interview customers all the time. They see customers, how they use our software. So I'll include product marketing because I will need them, that if this partnership goes to completion, I'll need them to help me market it, put together go-to-market. How do we do webinars if we're going to do webinars? So I include product marketing. And if their schedule allows, our executive leadership likes to sign off. And so I'll include the executive leader for each of those business lines because they do like to sign off because eventually they are going to put their reputation and their name behind this partnership and make sure it flies as well. So I look at it a little bit differently from sales and CS because they have different goals and different viewpoints. And the biggest viewpoint I think a lot of those teams miss is the actual voice of the customer and how they use software and how it actually flows within their organizations.
Yeah, love that. Really great blueprint for anyone to follow to kind of kick those things off. I think it's especially related to what you said earlier. At the very least, make sure that your product team, especially if your team is responsible for building and maintaining an integration, they need to be able to get access to a dev sandbox, API docs. They need these things. This is table stakes. I shouldn't even have to say it, but it's pretty amazing how many people might skip that step.
They're shocked when I say that I include product in this conversation. And that's largely because though they report to sales and they don't have involvement with product. And for me, product is table stakes. They run this, they run this engine.
100%. They're the ones who build it, right? So I'm a huge fan of getting them involved. Can only do it for so many calls. That's why I'm a big fan of collecting as much information before that call obviously happens, which I know you get. Let's continue now down the life cycle of a partner. Now we're up and running with partners. So you have active partnerships going. You've said that mutuality in partnerships is a myth, right? So can you unpack that? How do you operate knowing that perfect balance isn't a realistic goal to even pursue?
So I've never had a partnership where it's a 50-50 split on success. There's always one side that wants the partnership more. There always is. There's the early stage startups that are maybe going through their first round of funding who want access to our customer base. It may be us who are looking to go up market. So we're looking at partners that only work in the enterprise space and how do we use them to go up market. So there is always some side of the partnership that's getting more out of the conversation. And I think that we as partner leaders need to understand that too many of us think that it's a 50-50 split. And we get very frustrated when we see partnerships that we're doing all the work and we don't feel the other side is interested, right? It's almost like dating, right? One side's more interested than the other. And you're trying to figure out how to make this all work together. And so if you go into every partnership thinking it'll be a 50-50 split, you're vastly mistaken and you'll be incredibly disappointed. So every partnership we have, I already know which side is going to be doing most of the work. We have 2 partnerships right now. Like I'll use an example. We just launched a partnership with Workday. It's Workday. I know that we're going to be doing the bulk head of the work. I have great contacts at Workday that will help us navigate the Workday ecosystem, but we know that we're going to be doing the bulk head of the work. And we're okay with that because we know the value that we get with having Workday on our website. We know the value of having Workday and having access to the data and the people at Workday. So we get that. And I think that that's what frustrates smaller companies that are looking to partner with us is that they expect us to do as much work as they are. And that's just not the nature of how partnerships work.
Yeah, it's a great call out, and it's a lesson. I think, to be honest, you really need to go through that, go through the pain, so to speak, to really grasp that, which I certainly have, and it sounds like you have as well. Which is to say that the goal is not that every single one of your individual partnerships is like it's a mutually balanced, teeter-totter, to use that analogy. That's not realistic. But what you should aim for is if you zoom out further enough and you look at all your key partnerships, approximately both sides should be satisfied, and each side will have their own definition of what satisfaction looks like within a respectable time frame, right? So it's not like, hey, every month you delivered major value to that key partner. No, but every so often, certainly over a quarter or a year's time, certainly they should be able to look at tangible evidence that, you move the needle on some really important business outcomes that we care about. That's really the goal, right? That's a more realistic approach. But to your point, 50-50 mutual reciprocity, if you're zooming in and thinking it's always going to be balanced, it's actually quite detrimental in how you approach things. Does that kind of resonate with
It does, because I think it also changes how you work with some of those partners.
Yeah.
And it also brings up the point we talked about earlier about the ability to say no, right? We can't say yes to every single webinar. Every partner wants to do a webinar with us. We can't say yes to everything because either we're doing the bulk head of the work and they're getting the bulk head of the value. So it also makes that word no even more important when you understand not everything's a 50-50 split. Now, we try to lower barriers of entry into our program as much as we can. Like we have a pretty low barrier of entry agreement. We have a low barrier of entry of when you can access sales. But by and large, someone is doing the bulk of the work. And to your point, when I take a look out, I can see that in almost every partnership, we're very satisfied with what's happened and what's been going on. But we know that we're doing the bulk of the work in some of these partnerships. And they take time when you're the one doing the bulk of the work.
Yeah, got it. Totally agree. And that's the following question to that is not just saying no, which is kind of like maybe a prospective partner wants to partner, you ultimately have to say no. The next uncomfortable question that we have to face is when we have to say goodbye, so to speak, or deprioritize an existing partnership, which in my experience, having been in IC and also managing teams of them, that is one of the hardest things to do. It's a little bit easier to say no up front because you don't have any kind of traction with them. It's kind of like a faceless interaction, but it's really difficult to break up with someone for anyone who's ever done this in a relationship sense. So help me understand, Rachel, assuming this has happened for you at Unanet and other roles, you have a once productive partnership, but for whatever reason, things have changed. Maybe the key points of contact on the other side has changed. The company that you're partnering with has changed directions. Maybe they're now competitive or for whatever reason, they're just not productive anymore. And you have to have a really tough conversation, ultimately to deprioritize that partner. Can you walk us through kind of your approach to that and maybe your journey to building a strong backbone that you ultimately need to be able to have those conversations, either to get the partnership back on track or to just flat out tell them, hey, we simply need to deprioritize you and reinvest those resources where it belongs?
Yeah. So this is something that we're tackling here at Unanet currently because either we've bought a competitor or we're seeing our partners change their functionality and become a bit more competitive to us. And to be fair, we partner with companies a lot that have some cross-functional, some pieces of functionality that are similar to ours, but not to the detriment of each other's revenue. And I think that's a really important distinction to make that, we have an ERP platform, but we also, with contracts management as an example, but we partner with companies that have a much more elevated version of contracts management because we know our customers need that. So we don't say no to partnerships that have some overlap in functionality. It's where that overlap of functionality starts to erode revenue. That's where the problem starts.
Got it. Yeah.
We have those conversations with my counterpart as early as we possibly can to kind of identify where this problem is going to start and how do we continue to work together and what's that line for us before we're like, we need to tap out and do something different. Now, those are typically like really strategic partnerships that we've had for a really long time that we are now trying to figure out, how do we work with you today? And I don't say this because I want to push the decision off to somebody else. But when we have to start looking at strategic partnerships that we have to change and define, that really becomes an executive conversation. And if you are running a really top technology partner, every partner I have here at Unanet is aligned to one of our executives. Their executive is aligned to one of ours. And so we start talking about how do we work together in a competitive landscape. That's where executive to executive conversations have to take place. And you have to remove out the person that actually manages a relationship because I can't make decisions on functionality, competitiveness. Those conversations takes place above me. And that's fine. My role in all of that, though, is to make sure that my counterpart knows that we need to have these executive conversations and that I have fully coached the executive that I have here at Unanet to have those conversations with the partner. Because we want to try to play good cop as much as we can as partner leaders. We do have to play some bad cop. But when it comes to letting go of a very strategic partner, those have to be done above us because those are more of a business-to-business conversation versus a person-to-person conversation.
Yeah, again, you've been absolutely crushing with like just real practical examples that people can use in their real workflows. And I just to validate everything that Rachel's saying now, I've found that in the instances where I've mustered enough backbone to have those exact conversations with key partners, they actually ended up being some of the most powerful moments with a partner who ultimately turned out to be productive down the line because they're like, wow, this company's legit. We just kind of learned our lessons, so to speak, that we've dropped the ball, and it ultimately led them to stepping up. So I've had powerful moments on the partnership side, but internally within my leadership team, I've also built a lot of trust by doing this as well, going back to an earlier comment, because I'm showing the company I'm willing to do the hard things to protect our resources and prioritize what's important, the biggest opportunities in front of us. So just to put a cap on this conversation, having these tough conversations, saying no, deprioritizing partners, as painful as they are, can ultimately lead to even more successful partnerships, but also help you look awesome internally and build a lot more trust and respect.
And I think along with that too is that I think that when you have those hard conversations, some partners will say, yeah, you're right. this isn't a priority for me, and we end things mutually. And what that does for you is that takes a low productive partner off your plate that you've probably been trying to make productive and it's just not working. Then you can focus more time on maybe an up and coming partner that has the potential to be great. They just need more love and support to get there.
Exactly. I get literally we all have finite number of hours in the day, so you have to be ruthless with your prioritization. Last one before we shift gears. You've talked a lot about over-engineered partner plays, so to speak. You have pretty strong opinions on this. So why do so many look good on paper but ultimately flop in the field?
Because partner plays were meant for us and not the people actually using them, right? I look at sales playbooks. Like these suckers are like completely over-engineered, and I don't care how much detail you put into a co-selling playbook, your sales team is never going to follow it. They're still going to come back to you and say, who's the point of contact? Who would I talk to about this? So I believe in simple, that KISS method, right? Keep it simple. Because no matter how over-engineered it is, no matter how much detail you put into it, I can't tell you, and I love and adore every salesperson at Unanet, I can't tell you how many of them come to me with the same questions over and over again. And I'm fine with that because they want the information as quick as they possibly can because they want to action out whatever the question is and move on to the next prospect they're working with. So I think that when we over-engineer stuff, that's more about us and making sure that we have something on paper that makes us feel good versus who the actual audience is. And if I ask our audience here at Unanet, how do you want me to deliver information to you? By and large, most people say, hey, I'll just come to you with questions via Slack if I have something. Now, that makes me live and breathe in Slack, and that's okay. But I just think that when we over-engineer stuff, that's more for the partner team versus the actual end user of it.
Yeah, it's a really great call out. Over documentation is a thing, and as much as I'm maybe popular for talking about playbooks, you can only focus on them too much before you need to start engaging those stakeholders who are actually going to participate. And I like to say, like, documentation, even relationship development with those reps is table stakes. It's change management and project management, to your earlier point. That is the money. If you do not know how to bring people together, wrap your arms around them, point them in the same direction, and push them towards the finish line, then you've got nothing, right? So you can have the beautiful Notion doc or whatever. It's not gonna be enough. You need to be able to actually push people in one direction.
And I believe in documentation. I don't want to take anyone to take from this. I don't believe in documentation. I want, someday if I win the lottery and I leave Unanet, I want someone to be able to take over my role. But when we start talking about outwardly facing documentation, it's a lot of work, and most people aren't going to use it. So I keep it very simple, saying, I look at Crossbeam as an example. It's my favorite one. We have all of these great playbooks on how to work with Crossbeam, but our sales team still comes back to me and says, how do I run this play? How do I do this with a partner? Even though I've documented it fully for them, Crossbeam's documented it fully for them on how to use it, they're still going to come back to me because it's not something that they use every single day, right? They may use it every few weeks or so, and I'm okay with that. And as partner individuals, we have to be okay with that. Document what you do so that someone can take over, but don't expect external resources, sales team, partners, whatever, to be using those same external resources as much as you do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're really looking for a convergence where it's like, what are the workflows and work streams for, say, sales, and what does your workflow and work streams look like, and how can you eventually converge them so that it does become in the day in the life for folks like sales. Cool. Last segment that I want to focus on, I really wanted to zoom out and beyond the frameworks, beyond the partnership stuff, because obviously there's a much deeper layer to how you lead and operate, and frankly, to who you are as a person. You've obviously been through a lot more than most. So I just wanted to open this conversation up and ask, just like, how has, the experiences that you've been through over the last few years, how has that shaped kind of who you are, how you lead, and how you're showing up in work?
So I think for me, the biggest thing that's changed in me is that I bring more empathy to work than I have before. I am known for being no nonsense, pretty direct. Let's get things done and move forward. And I think that's important because, to our earlier point, time is finite. And I've learned that the hard way. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. And so time is finite. We work with what we have right now. But I bring a lot more empathy to what I do, that you don't know what's going on outside of the Zoom call. You have no idea what happened to me 15 minutes before. You have no idea what happened to me yesterday. So I try to be much more empathy to what I'm doing and understanding what the other person may be going through. Not going through, but understanding kind of a bit more about their mindset. And so what I've always been known for is I've never started a call with, all right, let's get going to business. It's, how's your day? How are you doing today? Even if what's the weather like, but kind of getting a little bit better into kind of how they're feeling today before we tackle whatever the topic is. So I think I've led with more empathy. I want people to know that I've shown up every day and done the best work that I can, and to also give myself some grace.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Rachel. And we certainly appreciate the vulnerability. And the next question on that is, for the folks who might be listening who are navigating, real life challenges, which I'm sure they are, whilst trying to perform at a high level and take care of their family. Beyond what you just shared, which was great, is there any other specific advice for someone who's really going through some really tough stretches of their life, whilst again still having to perform at a high level and kind of protect the family, so to speak?
Yeah. And so for people who don't know my story, my husband died in a boating accident just about 3 years ago when we taped this. And I think that what I have learned is that you go through this phase where you are just surviving. That's all you're doing. You're just trying to figure out the day to day and how do you survive this? How do you keep your family going? My daughter was 2.5 when this happened. And so how do you navigate this world now as a solo mom when you used to share everything? And I try to tell people that grief is awful, no matter if it's a friend, parent, a sibling. But what's different about when you lose a spouse is that everything that I knew to be true changed like that. Every plan I had, every decision I had, everything changed. I think about the little things that you do for your wife, whether it be taking the trash out, whether it be unloading the dishwasher, making decisions about daycare. That was now all on me. And so I've had to learn to give myself some grace, that there are going to be some good days, really great days. And there are going to be days that maybe it's a song, maybe it's a memory that just make me sad. And I feel very lucky that I work for an organization that has really given me the grace I've needed as we've gone through this process. I feel lucky that all I had to do is tell my boss, look, August 20th, that's a really rough day for me. I'm just taking it off as a mental health day. No problem. No questions asked. And so I think it's really important that when you're going through profound grief, you need to have grace and take care of yourself. Someone really gave me this great analogy that when you're on a plane, the flight attendant always says, put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. And I have no help to my daughter. I'm not a great mom unless I'm taking care of myself first. And so I just say to everyone who's going through grief like this, take care of yourself, give yourself some grace. And if others around you don't understand what you're going through and don't want to understand, that's a them, not a you. And understand the best people in your life are not the ones throwing advice at you. They're the ones who just want to listen.
Seriously, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and transparent, Rachel. I know you've done that not just in these conversations, but on LinkedIn as well. And the community certainly appreciates for you kind of leading by example with it, sharing your own experiences. The last question on this one, just thinking of your daughter, obviously she's now at that kind of formative age where she's starting to have core memories and things like that. So what's one thing that you hope Elsa really remembers when she looks back at this pivotal time, just how hard you're working to kind of take care of yourself and ultimately take care of her, if you don't mind me asking?
Elsa has an activity that she does, and they start every session with, I am strong, I am brave, I can do this. And it is something that she and I talk about a lot, that my husband's name is Brian. We refer to him as Daddy in the house. That Daddy would want us to be strong, be brave, and just do this. And I want her to know that every day I have shown up to the best of my ability. I could have very easily said, I tap out, I'm done. I don't want to work anymore. I just want to grieve. And I made the decision that I need to show her how to be strong and how to be brave. If that's what I want her to do, I need to show her the same thing. And we talk about how we do big things, that we have made decisions in our life going forward that maybe not would have been what the three of us would have done, but it works for her and I. So I just always want her to know that we are strong, we are brave, and we can do this. And it's something we say every night before we go to bed. It's something we think about when we talk about Brian. But it's a really important mantra in our house that I think is not just important for us, but I think it's important for a lot of families out there, that you need to be strong, you need to be brave, and you can do this.
Look, well, I think that's a really powerful message, and I think a really fitting place to end this conversation. Rachel, I just want to sincerely thank you for obviously the really vulnerable last segment we've had here, and certainly for this entire conversation, which was seriously packed with clarity and things that people can use today. So, Rachel, thank you so much for joining the show. I seriously can't wait for this episode to go
Thank
live,
you.
and certainly I'll be sharing your LinkedIn profile so people can connect and potentially partner with you. So
Thank
thanks
you.
again so much, Rachel.
Thanks, Chris.